Welcome back to Motoring Box. I'm Sean McKellar and you find me again in a random industrial estate because I've got another ownership update on my 2013 Ford SZ Territory. You're watching Motoring Box, proudly supported by Century Batteries. Now it has been 12 months of ownership on this thing. I've officially owned it for a year and the last update you had from me was about 7 months ago. So what's actually been happening with this car and am I actually still enjoying it? Well, to answer the latter question, yes, I still love this car. I think it is easily worth the money I paid for it. Hasn't been without its problems, but overall, from an ownership perspective, it has been a pleasure to own. I really love driving this thing. To me, it's like the ultimate family car for around, the $10,000 to $13,000 mark. And again, I put this question out to you guys in the comment section last time. For the same amount of money, what would you actually buy? And I think some of you beat me by saying a used Toyota Kluger. But for the same amount of money, you're getting one of these Klugers, and they just don't really float my boat. I mean, have a look at the interior. They're just a little bit, I don't know, I just don't like it. In comparison, if you have a look at the SZ interior, aside from a lot of buttons looking the same in that center stack, I have to say it looks a lot more modern and it's a much more pleasurable place to be, in my opinion. Now, in the previous ownership update, which I'll link up here in the corner, I brought you guys up to speed with the issues that I'd had with the car up until that time, and they were fairly minor. I had some problems with the window switches, which is a reoccurring issue with pretty much any Territory. If you buy one of these, I would recommend going onto eBay, getting a full set of replacement switches, but instead make it 2 sets so that you can replace the whole set, do them all at once, and then throw the spare set in the boot so that if you're out and about and one of the switches fails and makes one of your windows go down and not go up again like it happened with me, you've got your switches in the boot or in the garage ready to go. Swap them out and it's fixed. Get another set, keep them spare at all times. That's what I would do anyway, and it's actually what I'm doing right now. But the only other issues I hadn't been fixed yet. I'd identified them, but I hadn't fixed them. So let's talk through some of those now. The first issue I identified back in that previous video was that the center bearing on the tail shaft needed to be replaced. I wasn't going to do this myself. I don't really have the confidence or the tools or the setup to do it easily. So I sent it down to my local Ford Territory specialist, Cole from BNG Motorsports in Bundamba. For around $400, $450, he took the tail shaft out, replaced the bearing, put it back in, and the issue has been fixed. But when it comes to the tail shafts in these cars, there seem to be 2 different types floating around. There's the type that I have that actually has a uni joint, a universal joint, in the tail shaft just after the center bearing. If your tail shaft is this type, it is actually very easy for someone like Cole to replace that center bearing, put it back together, and you have a really good chance of it still being in balance, being able to bolt it back up and having happy days. But if you have the other tail shaft type, which has CV joints in it, the going opinion, and Cole's opinion too, is that you're better off just replacing that whole tail shaft with either a brand new one or a full reconditioned balanced unit. Trying to give one of those to a mechanic to replace the center bearing can be done, but apparently it's just the issue of getting them back together and getting them balanced that's the problem. But anyway, I had the tail shaft with the uni joint in it. Cole was able to fix it. It's been fixed for not a lot of money. The next issue I had in that previous video was there was a persistent clunking noise from the rear end whenever you were driving on pretty much any road, smooth or not. Now, when you hear about clunking noises in the back of a Territory, it could literally be anything. A lot of people will say it's the rear diff bushes, which on this car actually were not too bad. They don't need to be replaced yet. It can be trailing arms, or they call it blade arms, I think they're called. It can even be sway bar bushes too, which it was none of those things. What it actually was the rear shock absorbers. When the car was down at Cole's garage in Bundamba, he noticed that the shock on this side was actually leaking a bit of oil and needed to be replaced. So I went onto eBay and I found a brand new set of Ford spec rear shock absorbers, Ford branded, OEM spec, perfect, which is what I like generally most of the time. So I bought those 2 shocks. They weren't very expensive. I'll put the price and the listing up on screen. Swapped the shocks out, which is actually really easy to do on one of these cars. Put it back down and perfect. It's been perfect ever since. Not a single noise out of the back of this car. And the final issue I had was actually brake shudder, especially from the front brakes here. Pretty much when you were braking from 60 or 70 kilometers per hour or faster, you would feel a judder through the pedal, and it's pretty much warped brake rotors. Now, people's opinions on this, judging by the video I filmed when I replaced the rotors and the pads, there are a wide range of opinions on what is the problem and what is the fix. Now, I have my own opinion on this, and to me it's pretty much down to the brake booster falling out of adjustment, and the pads keep rubbing on the rotor, and it basically causes either uneven wear or causes the rotor to warp. I don't really know which one, but to me that's the problem, and that's what happens, or that's the symptom you get, I suppose. Some people disagree, but I went ahead, replaced the rotors and the pads, adjusted that brake booster adjustment, and I've done about 8,000 kilometers on the new rotors, new pads with that adjustment done, and the brakes are still perfectly smooth. Now with the engine, haven't had any major problems. About 3 or 4 months ago, I decided to give it an oil and filter change, which I've done. I still haven't fixed the leak from the thermostat, so it is still coming out slowly, just like it was before. Not really too worried about it. It's probably a drop every time you drive. It's barely anything. The level's not changing on the coolant overflow. So really happy days. I've not really spent a lot of time under here, but it hasn't needed it. I mean, there's just no oil leaks, which for me on a Falcon is unheard of. It's literally the only car in my fleet which doesn't have a leak. But really, if you're going for a petrol territory, this is probably the most reliable part in the vehicle. If you're going for a diesel, I don't think they're as bad as people let on. You see some real horror stories when it comes to the price of some of the replacement parts, especially fuel injectors for the diesel. Apparently they're about $1,000 each. 6 grand to do them all. Ow. I don't know, like you do hear those nightmare stories, and if you buy a diesel, chances are, you know, you might experience one of them, whether it's the injectors or the high pressure fuel pump or any number of things that could potentially cost a lot of money to repair or fix. But you kind of have to remind yourself that you see a ton of diesel territories still on the road today, so really, are they that bad? I don't know. It's up to you to decide. But I have zero regrets at going for the Barra. The Barra wins for me every single time. Now this car does have a transmission cooler already installed, so that kind of finished things off from a mechanical maintenance perspective. One thing I've done to this car though is actually replace the low beam and also the fog lights. So let's have a look and have a bit of a chat about that too. So for the fog lights, Aussie Parts actually have this LED fog light upgrade, and it replaces the entire fog light housing with a sort of 6000K temperature LED light. I have to say they're actually really bright compared to the stock standard halogens, and they do look very tidy and sort of modernize the front of this car a little bit more. So rather than having yellow, you have this nice crisp, very cool white. In addition to that, I decided to replace the low beams with a set of steady LED bulbs as well, which I have to say are incredible. Let me turn them on now. Now these are a slightly different temperature color to the fogs, but it's pretty close. I don't know how it'll look on camera, but at nighttime they both look pure white and they match up really well. These were about $200 or $170, $80. Not cheap, but when it comes to LEDs, these are very bright. They're much brighter, well not much, a little bit brighter than the stock standard halogen bulbs, and I'm very happy with it. I'm usually not a big fan of LED bulbs, but that comes down to my experience. The previous ones that I've used don't have a lot of throw when it comes to how far the light goes. These, on the other hand, are really good. They've transformed my opinion of LED bulbs. And because they're in a projector housing, the beam pattern is the same. If you were to do the halogens here for the high beams with LEDs, that might be a different story, but in the projector lens, perfect. Now, I didn't get kickbacks or a discount for any of these. I bought them both at full price, but I wholeheartedly recommend both of these if you have an SZ. When it comes to new issues with this SZ territory, there's really only one that comes to mind, or possibly two. It's one issue, I just don't know what it's being caused by. What it is, right, when you drive along the road and you get up to around 60 or 70 kilometers per hour, you get this kind of whoop, 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 which speeds up as you go. Now, if you're hearing that, you're going to be probably saying in the comments, that's probably your wheel bearings. And it could be the wheel bearings, at least the front ones. That's where it's kind of coming from, and you're not going to hear it on camera. It's just not quite smooth. It feels smooth, right? It's not something you feel, it's something you hear. So it could be that the front wheel bearings are maybe on their early stages of being on the way out. That is a potential thing. Or it could be the tires, actually. There's a set of Goodyear OptiLife tires, I think they are, and I do not rate these tires at all. In the wet, as soon as the road is greasy just a little bit, it is almost dangerous how low the grip levels are on those tires. They kind of have this all-terrain tread pattern, which I think is completely unnecessary for an on-road SUV like this. So I may get them swapped out anyway for a set of Bridgestones. I haven't looked at what tread pattern, but it'll be a road-based SUV tire. Or it could be the wheel bearings, which are, you know, another well-known issue. So again, you have this issue of, do you just throw new tires on it, and then what if the sound is still there? Like, at least you'll have better tires and better grip, but yeah, if it doesn't fix the problem, then you're going to be up for, you know, a set of wheel bearings anyway. This thing's still awesome to drive, by the way. I still love it, even after a year, hasn't worn off. So yeah, apart from that problem, like even here at 70, this is the speed limit, it's smooth and it's quiet. It's just when you really listen, you hear that kind of, that slightly uneven kind of pulsating sound. One thing I want to talk about too is the 6-speed ZF transmission. I haven't really talked much about it, apart from it being really good. I think I said in the last video, I quite admire it. It's actually got a lot to do with those fuel economy figures too, because it's got a lot of logic built into it, which not many people seem to talk about, and that is, as soon as you let off the throttle, or it senses you're going down a hill and that you're not using the throttle, so it actually starts cycling back through the gears, and it's doing it right now to slow you down. It's engine braking, but it's very subtle. It's not really in your face. Sometimes when you go down a steep hill in third gear, it will drop you back to second quite aggressively, because it sort of knows in that situation, hey, this guy needs to slow down and I'm going to do it for him and save him fuel. Yeah, even though it does shift quite aggressively in that instance, it's welcome because it's doing a great job helping you slow down. So yes, I do think it's got a lot to do with those fuel economy savings that you get on something like this. Without it, if you just had a BTR 4-speed in an earlier territory, it's definitely going to be a lot more thirsty due to it doing absolutely nothing at all to help you save fuel unless you downshift yourself. So yes, my position on the SZ territory, and pretty much most petrol territories in general, is they are a must buy, or a must consider at least, if you're looking for an SUV of this size and this type and this capacity, I suppose. Definitely consider them. Again, as I said in the previous video, don't consider it to be a maintenance-free proposition. You're going to be spending money on these cars, maintaining them, keeping them going. But again, for the price that you pay for them, I think they are still a really good deal. I still sing the praise of this vehicle, and when I look at the views that the previous video got, I think there is still a lot of interest in 2024, 2025 about a vehicle of this type. I think they are still really good second-hand buys. And one other thing that this car has beat a lot of other SUVs anyway is how well it goes off the line. 2-ton SUV, because of that 6-speed ZF, you get up to 60 way quicker than a lot of these 4-cylinder economy shit boxes that are getting around. So that always puts a smile on your face. So I'm going to sign this off here, guys. In summary, 1 year later, I'm still a really big fan of the SZ Territory. I think Ford really were onto a winner with this vehicle, and it still remains a really good second-hand buy if you can get one for the right price with the right maintenance history. And if you don't have that maintenance history, be ready to maintain it. Even if it has maintenance history, there are always things that are going to crop up. But really, the thing about the SZ is, and Falcons in general, is that there's no real showstopper problems that come up. Even when the diff bushes flog out, they still drive well. Even when the center bearing starts to flog out, they still drive well. It's just going to be little things that start to bother you that you need to spend money on to fix it. So that's it, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you have a question or a comment, do put it in the comment section below. I love to read them, and I read every single one of them. I will answer any questions that are down there, but in the meantime, have a good one, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.